In this video, we show you how to properly install our steering boost kit for the Jeep JL and JT platform. The boost kit will work with all Wrangler and Gladiator models and is compatible with every motor configuration in the lineup. This video was filmed on a 3.6 liter. It is important to note that the install on the diesel and 392 will vary from this video. Remove air cleaner box and cover all openings. Using a trim tool or a flat nose screwdriver, remove the plastic grill. This is to gain access to the fresh air breather tube that is located underneath the factory airbox. As a side note, this step is optional. If you have a winch or a bumper that makes it difficult to remove the grill, you can remove or pull back the inner fender liner to gain access to the pump. We removed both along with the front bumper in this video for filming purposes only. You do not have to remove the bumper to install this kit. If you do choose to remove the grill, you will need to remove the two fasteners that hold the fresh air breather tube to the grill side. Once the two fasteners are removed, you can go ahead and push up on the fresh air breather tube and push it out of the rubber grommet that holds it into the airbox bracket. Remove the airbox support bracket. You do this by simply unbolting the four fasteners that hold it into place, then remove it from the vehicle. After the airbox support bracket is removed, go ahead and unbolt the power steering reservoir from the retaining bracket next to the battery. We have found that it is much easier and cleaner to leave the reservoir connected to the pump and remove the entire assembly from the Jeep as one unit. Next, remove the two bolts that hold the pump to the frame. Remove the bolt that holds the high pressure line into the pump. Then remove the high pressure line from the pump. It is important to note that there shouldn't be any tension on this line. It should pull out of the pump very easily. Next, cut the low pressure line that comes from the bottom of the pump. It is a good idea to place a piece of cardboard under the Jeep to catch the extra fluid that will drip from the line. To gain better access to the wire harness, you can pull the pump with the reservoir attached through the fender well and turn the pump on its side to gain better access to the clips. It is important that you make sure that both connectors are all the way seated into place before you depress the plastic clip to remove the connector from the pump. Be sure that you do not tug on the wires to remove the connector. Use a flat nose screwdriver to unseat the clip. Now that you have the pump removed from the vehicle, you can go ahead and remove the low pressure line from the pump that you cut in the previous step. Install the new hose clamp on the hose that is provided with the kit. Then install the hose on the low pressure barb fitting on the pump. Next, slide the hose clamp down over the barb fitting. Next, remove the socket head from the port valve. It is critical that the pump is removed from the vehicle and the valve is facing up before you remove the socket head from the pump. After you've removed the socket head cap, use a magnet or tweezers to remove the spring and spring guide from the pump. You can discard the cap and spring, but you will need to reuse the spring guides, so be sure not to lose it. Next, apply grease to the spring and the spring guide to prevent them from falling apart during assembly. Typical axle grease may be used. If you fail to use grease to hold the parts in place, you will have install issues. The spring guide will fall sideways and the pump will fail to create pressure. You will also apply grease to the other side of the spring to hold the spring and the spring guide into the new blow-off valve. Once you've done this, you can go ahead and install the new blow-off valve into the pump. Torque the valve to 6 foot-pounds. Next, ensure the pressure set screw is backed all the way out, so it's unscrewed out against the snap ring. It will come shipped this way, but you just want to double check that it is backed all the way out. If for some reason the pressure set screw is dialed all the way in, a high pressure condition could exist prior to pressure setting. This can cause damage to the pump if this is the case, so you want to make sure that this pressure set screw is backed all the way out against the snap ring before you install the pump back into the vehicle. Next, install the pump back into the Jeep. Now that the pump is back in the Jeep, you're ready to install the pressure tap fitting. This plate will sandwich between the high pressure line and the actual pump. First, press the pressure tap into the high pressure line fitting directly into the pump. Then install the factory high pressure line into the pressure tap. Then bolt together using the supplied 8mm socket head bolt. Next, you need to assemble the gauge and attach it to the pressure tap sandwich plate. Use pipe dope or Teflon tape on the connection between the gauge and the supplied hose. Then thread the gauge into the sandwich plate. Do not over torque this connection. Overhand tight is all that's needed. Once you are finished installing the gauge on the pump, go ahead and reinstall the wire connectors to the pump. Be sure that they are fully seated and the red safety clips click back into place. Next, reinstall the power steering fluid reservoir. Once you're done with this step, we're going to pause on installing the boost kit and move on to the cooler kit. A power steering cooler must be used with the boost kit, or overheating will occur, resulting in pump or steering gear failure. The Apex steering cooler was designed specifically for the boost kit and has been tested and proven. Other non-specific coolers may not provide sufficient cooling to protect the system. We strongly recommend using our cooler with the boost kit. First, remove the cap from the power steering reservoir. Next, cut the low pressure rubber line that comes off the steering gear with a razor or PEX cutters work great as well. Access the line through the left front inner fender. If you have aftermarket inner fenders, you will need to remove them or simply flex the stock inner liner out of the way to gain access. Now you're ready to remove the 2 bolts that hold the low pressure hard line to the frame. There are a couple of ways to remove this from the Jeep after it has been unbolted. If you have your grill removed, you can simply pull the line off the Jeep from the front in one piece. Or if your bumper and grill configuration prevent you from removing it in one piece, you can cut the hard line on both sides next to the bolt hole locations and in the middle, and this will allow you to remove the hard line in sections. Next, remove the 2 bolts that hold the high pressure line to the frame that are located below the radiator. Once the line is unbolted, remove the mounting tabs by prying the steel tabs free with the screwdriver. Discard these tabs, but leave the rubber sleeves on the line as you'll need them in a future step. Next, we are going to assemble the cooler. Before you install the hose fittings in the cooler, add a small amount of power steering fluid to the O-ring and the threads. Then tighten and torque to 7 foot-pounds. Next, flip the cooler over and install the mounting hardware into the cooler. You'll do this by inserting the T-slot nuts into the channel that's provided on the cooler. Then bolt the brackets to the cooler into the T-slot nut. Now you're ready to mount the cooler on the Jeep. To do this, you'll need to slide the cooler between the high pressure line and the cross member from below. Then simply bolt the cooler to the cross member using the high pressure line mounting hose. A 10mm ratchet wrench works well for this location. It's kind of tight. Once you have tightened the mounting hardware to the cross member, you can move up top and tighten the bolts into the T-slot nuts. Pro tip: push down on the cooler lightly to provide enough room to get your 10mm ratchet wrench on the bolt head. Once you are done tightening, you can push down on the cooler again to remove the wrench. Now that the cooler is mounted, pull the hose you previously attached to the power steering pump down and along the inside of the frame. Then pull the hose alongside the fitting to measure the length you will need to cut. Mark the hose, then cut. Be sure that you install the hose clamps onto the end of the hose before you install the hose onto the fitting. Next, slide the hose onto the fitting of the cooler. Then slide the clamp over the barb fitting on the cooler. For the driver's side, use the remaining hose that you have left from the section that you cut off in the previous step. Install the hose clamp on the hose, then install on the barb fitting on the cooler. Then slide the clamp over the barbed fitting. Next, route the hose up between the frame and the cooler up towards the steering gear. Pull all the slack up towards the steering gear. Next, install a clamp on the end of the low pressure line that is coming out of the steering gear. Then pull the new supplied hose up to where it meets flush with the hose that's coming out of the steering gear. Mark it and then cut. Now you can install the new supplied barb fitting that will connect the two together. Before you connect the two together, slide a hose clamp down over the barb fitting and clamp in place. Last but not least, use the supplied metal zip ties to secure the high pressure line to the brackets that come off the cooler. Be sure to wrap the zip ties around the rubber sleeve that exists on the high pressure line. Now that your cooler is installed, you can add fluid to the system again. We have had good luck with CHF11. You must use high-grade pure synthetic fluid. Do not use ATF. Fill the reservoir clear to the top for the bleeding process. Now you're ready to bleed the system. In order to do this, the Jeep needs to be on the ground. With the reservoir full and the cap back on, work the tires back and forth from right to left. This is a two-person job. Have an assistant work the steering wheel from right to left while you keep an eye on the fluid level in the reservoir. If it drops below the minimum fill line, stop turning the wheels and fill to the max line, then continue to turn the wheels back and forth. Repeat this process until the fluid level stabilizes in the reservoir. Now you're ready to set the pressure in your pump. We are demonstrating this with the pump out of the vehicle so you can clearly see what you need to turn to set the pressure. This is for demonstration purposes only. When you set the pressure, the pump will be installed in the Jeep. This is a two-person job as well, so you'll need to have somebody in the Jeep turning the steering wheel while you check the pressure and adjust the pressure set on the blow-off valve. With the Jeep's e-brake on and the wheels chocked, start the engine and hold the steering at full lock with pressure against full lock. Gauge will not read any pressure unless you hold the steering wheel with force against the steering stop. Ask your assistant reading the gauge what the pressure is. It will be less than 1000 psi. Turn the vehicle off and screw in the adjuster 1/4 turn clockwise. Check the new pressure. Repeat this procedure until you reach 2000 psi on the gauge. Never turn more than 1/4 turn at a time before you check the pressure at each interval. Now that your pressure is set, you'll need to remove the sandwich plate and the gauge from the pump, then reinstall the factory high pressure line back directly into the pump. This is an important step that you do not want to skip. You do not need to read pressure or monitor pressure after the pressure has been set on the pump, so it's imperative that you remove these two pieces. Use the factory bolt to reinstall the high pressure line. Then take a second to wipe off any excess fluid that might be on the pump. Now you're ready to reassemble. Go ahead and follow the same steps that you followed to take everything apart.